Hello and welcome to Law Explained. In this video, I'll be looking at the developments that the different treaties brought about over time. Any study of EU law is greatly assisted with a little knowledge of the context in which the European construction was created. Now, this video is by no means going to delve into the intricacies of the history of the European Union, but if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend researching it because it is very interesting. What I'm going to try and do in this video is just give you a little bit of context to assist you with your learning of EU law. So I'll be looking at each of the major treaties and how that served to develop the union we know today. I'll be working from the foundations of the European construction right up to the modern day. The story of the European construction is one of trying to get European powers to desist from what had been their favourite hobby for hundreds of years, which was massacring one another. In the aftermath of World War II, Europe lay in rubble, and leaders sought to make war between France and Germany impossible, so that the horrors of World War II would never again be repeated. In this sense, the European construction is, at its heart, and always has been, a peace project. The Treaty of Paris was signed in April of 1951, and it created the European Coal and Steel Community. This put the production of these raw materials under the control of a common authority. Now, if you haven't guessed why these materials were chosen, it's because they're the ingredients of war. And by putting the production of these two key ingredients under the control of the high authority, it meant that neither France nor Germany could stockpile significant amounts of these materials and go to war with one another. So what the treaty did is it created a high authority, a parliamentary assembly, a council of ministers and a court of justice and consultative committee to oversee this peace project. The next step in the European project were the treaties of Rome. Now, you'll often hear Treaty of Rome, and that's because one of the treaties is much more significant than the other, but in fact there were two treaties signed in Rome in 1957. One was the treaty establishing the European Atomic Energy Community, or the Euratom Treaty, and the other, the more significant for our purposes, is the treaty establishing the European Economic Community, or EEC. The 6 founding countries of this community were France, Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, Italy and the Netherlands. The objective of this community of nations was the creation of a common market based on 4 freedoms: free movement of persons, goods, capital and services. The EEC Treaty provided for the elimination of customs duties between member states, as well as the creation of common external customs tariffs. It also introduced a common agricultural policy and created the European Social Fund. It also sought the objective of the development of closer relations between the member states. So with that basis in place, the Union then developed further over time. And there are a lot of key developments that happened that would not have made the Union we know today possible, but which in themselves may not seem that huge or revolutionary, and it's those that we'll look at next. So the merger treaty in 1965, the importance of this treaty is really underestimated. In fact, you don't really hear that much about it at all. But this was essentially the fusion of the executive bodies of the European Coal and Steel Community, European Atomic Energy Community and European Economic Community to create a single council and commission of the European communities. It also introduced the principle of a single budget for this community. This is really paving the way for the European Union as opposed to numerous European communities. Subsequently, the Parliament was also strengthened. The Treaty of Luxembourg in 1970 saw the grant of certain budgetary powers to the Parliament. The Treaty of Brussels then in 1975 gave the right to the Parliament to reject a budget and to grant the Commission a discharge for implementing the budget. It also established the Court of Auditors. The Act of 20th of September 1976 then introduced parliamentary elections by direct universal suffrage, which really aided the Parliament's legitimacy and democratised the Union. From there then, we move towards further integration of the member states. The Single European Act saw the introduction of qualified majority voting to multiple areas to improve council decision making. Parliament assent for enlargement and association agreements is now required. It also introduced the cooperation procedure, which gave the Parliament limited legislative power. The Treaty of Maastricht then, signed on the 7th of February 1992 and effective the following year, created the pillar structure, which you may have heard of. It established also the European Central Bank and the Euro system of central banks, which were key stepping stones towards the adoption of the single currency, obviously a staple of any common market. However, most importantly, the Treaty of Maastricht introduced European citizenship. Destined to be the fundamental status of European citizens, this is complementary to and does not replace national citizenship. Rather, it adds to it. Suddenly, the right of movement is no longer tied to being a worker. It's an intrinsic right stemming from citizenship. Citizenship and the Treaty of Maastricht in general really represent the shift from a purely economic union to a veritable union of peoples, as was the hope of the founders of the European project. The next major treaty then was the Treaty of Amsterdam, signed in 1997 and effective from 1999. Attempts to reform the institutions were not successful and were a driving factor in the need for the Treaty of Nice, which followed shortly after in 2001. However, while the treaty may not have been a success in terms of institutional reform, it did bring significant progress in the area of cooperation in policing and judicial matters. The Treaty of Nice then, signed in 2001 and effective from 2003, saw the revision of the number of MEPs for each member state with a new maximum of 732. It also extended to the Parliament the power to challenge acts of Council, the Commission and the European Central Bank. The big treaty then, the one you've probably all heard about, the Treaty of Lisbon. It stemmed from the rejection of the Constitutional Treaty in 2 referenda held in 2005. The Treaty of Lisbon entered into force in 2009 and had many important aspects, some of which were symbolic and some of which went a lot deeper. Symbolically, for example, the treaty establishing the European Community changed its name to the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. Similarly, the co-decision process became the ordinary legislative procedure. However, the Lisbon Treaty also had very significant changes on how the Union actually operates. It provided clarity on the powers of the Union, breaking them down into 3 types of competence: exclusive, shared and supporting. It ended the pillar structure. It introduced the power for the European Parliament to elect the President of the Commission. It also changed the maximum number of MEPs to 751, setting a new minimum for a member state of 6 and a maximum number for a member state of 96, and Germany is the state that has that amount of MEPs. It also recognised for the first time the European Council as being an institution of the European Union. Hopefully that video is helpful in providing a little insight on what each treaty brought about in terms of where we are today. I'll be doing other videos on the different institutions, so do make sure to look out for them, as it's really there where your knowledge is really important when it comes to answering exam questions. Hopefully this has provided a bit of context, and I look forward to seeing you again.